My name's Andy Tran, aka Horitran. I'm a member of Horiyen Ichimon. I am a international award-winning tattoo artist.
Welcome to the Vietnamese. I'm your host, Kenneth Nguyen. Being part of a culture of nearly 100 million Vietnamese people in the world today comes with a lot of pain, proud history, and privilege. Join me as I highlight and explore the Vietnamese experience from all over. Andy, thank you for coming on today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Before we get into the technical side of tattooing and the historical side and all of that, I just had this burning question I had to ask because it's related to the way I've experienced tattooing. But how often do people regret getting tattooed? And I'm not saying regret from you or your work, but just overall, what's the general sort of vibe out there when people, when you talk to people about getting a tattoo and they're regretting it?
That is a great question. Not my clients, but statistically, it's 25%. It's one out of four. I know that because I consulted with a laser removal practice. And so they gave me the stats of it, and it's 25% of this newer generation because, they're getting more smaller tattoos more rapidly, more spontaneously, things like that.
Why do you think people regret it?
A lot of the times it's probably impulse decisions, or it's just like, or they're like with their friends and they were drunk or something like, hey, this is kind of cool, or let's get this, right? They usually when you turn 18, you kind of get the tattoo just to get the tattoo, right? That's like the impulse today. So when I say today, it's a different market today than it was, say, 20 or 30 years ago. So yeah, you would just get a tattoo just because. It's just like when you turn 21, you kind of just want to go have a drink or you want to do those things that you're allowed to do now. So it's very impulse like, or you're kind of a kid, and then you finally turned 18, you're still kind of haven't experienced a lot in the world yet, and you kind of still don't know what you want, and you still haven't made like enough strong decisions. There are very rare cases where like I've had people that come to me when they're minors, when they're like 15, 16 with an idea, and they'll come back to me when they're 18, still solid with that idea, very determined, very, very clear-minded. So it's yeah.
That makes me think about tracking these kinds of individuals, right? If you think about the success in your life, it really depends on this ability to think long term strategically, right? Like I have an idea at 15 and I'm willing to go back to that tattoo artist to develop my idea at 18, 19 when I'm able to do this. And that could probably show up in the way you go about your finances, you go about your education, career path, because it shows like deeply thinking about and the reason I bring all this up is, I want to get into the whole idea of when people come to you with a real plan that
Mhm.
unfolds out in a very different way, artfully, and there's a technical way to approach all this stuff, right?
Yes. So I prefer to work with people who have a solid idea. It's better for them and it's better for me. If they're unsure, it's fine to give me the idea if they give me full creative freedom. But if they're in the middle and they're indecisive and they're unsure, I prefer to just not take their money. I prefer to give them their time to wait till the inspiration hits them or they've made a a strong decision. It just makes everything a lot smoother, right? And like you said, uh, same thing in kind of life, right? Where if you are dedicated and you have the discipline and then you have everything ready and everything set and you have that plan, everything goes a lot smoother. Everything can become greater faster.
You're the first tattoo artist that I am going to be interviewing. And I have a few, and I've always wanted to interview Vietnamese tattoo artists because when I was growing up, I always saw tattoos on men, older men, like my dad and his friends in that generation. You would see tattoos that were jailhouse tattoos, basically, right? Or they would get them in the
Yeah.
military out in the field, and there were never real tattoos on older men that were of any artful significance. And that's changed significantly today.
Yeah, in the Vietnamese community, right? So growing up down here in Westminster, Little Saigon, I never was into tattoos. I never wanted to get into tattoos. I was fairly anti-tattoo, right? Just like you, the only things I've seen in tattoos were lettering, right? Letters and numbers, right? So I didn't even know that you could do pictures in tattoos. And there was just like that big stigma of it was only gang tattoos or it was a way to be identified, right? If you ever got pulled over by the police or if someone was looking for you, they could identify you by the tattoos that you had. So we always try to play like incognito. It wasn't until I moved to the Bay Area that I found it as a art form. And specifically Vietnamese, there's a very small percentage of Vietnamese tattoo artists at that time. You're talking about like, like late 80s, 90s, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Now, where did you in the Bay Area get this spark of inspiration to get into tattooing?
In the Bay, I got my first tattoo in like my friend's bathroom by some guy who from a guy who just got out of San Quentin, and then he was like tattooing, and then it was like guitar string, Walkman motor, like cigarette ash, super grody, but it was it was fun. It was a cool experience. I traded him some like throwing knives for the tattoo, and then it kind of like sparked my interest into it. People were like a lot like as a young kid, people were like, "Hey, you should like get into tattoos, right?" Because I drew a lot and stuff like that. I didn't really think anything of it. I was like, nah, I'm not really interested in being an artist. I was more interested in, having a regular job or something like that. And then from there, I got an apprenticeship into like a regular shop. And then from there, I came back home to Westminster, and then I reapprenticed again at my tattoo with my current master, Jess Yen.
Now, this idea of being an artist, every tattoo tech or person who's doing tattooing has got to have some level of drawing ability, right? Or is that not the case?
Drawing ability and tattooing, I think of tattooing as more as a culture, a tradition, and a technical skill, right? Drawing in itself is also a technical skill. All these things can be taught just like anything else, like in a school or a trade school, right? I believe the general thing is a pure, genuine interest in the art form. If you have a good character and you have a genuine interest and you have good discipline, I think anyone can really do something with it. You can be very talented, but if you have bad ethics or a bad attitude, then it's not going to work out for you either way.
Why?
Or no self control. It's really bad in a way.
Why?
Uh, well, tattooing is kind of today. It's a bit more of like kind of like a lot of rock stardom, you know, and it can really take a hold of you if you don't have a lot of self control, because people party, you have like easy access to those type of circles. You know what I mean? So it's easy for you to kind of like lose track of the art. Some people get busy having fun, and they kind of forget like the work ethic. And if you're really talented and you can get really in those circles really fast, but then if you don't continue working on your art form, you don't continue to grow, then you plateau at a very fast point. I don't know if that answered that question.
Yeah, it does. And the next thing is, well, how do you know as a tattoo artist that you've plateaued?
That's the problem. You probably won't. The the other people will tell you, you know, or if you don't critically take a look at yourself, right? Like seriously take a look at your work and analyze your work and be like, did I improve? Did I get better? Do I feel better? Being an artist is kind of a curse, right? We're
Yeah.
just kind of reaching for something that's kind of perfect to us,
Yeah.
or reaching something that, maybe our hand skill cannot reach our creative skill, right? Or our desire, right? It's, many of us are very humble, but a lot of us have like a lot of artist pride, I don't care like who they are or what they say, but if you're an artist, you have some kind of pride in your work, right? You put your time, you put your effort, you turned your head to these naysayers like, hey, don't do that. There's no money in this. There's no career. There's no future, right? Like you're crazy, and like, yeah, we're kind of crazy. We're kind of weird. We're kind of oddballs. We're kind of, counterculture.
Tattoo artists that I've known, I know a few of them. I have a cousin, first cousin, who's been a tattoo artist for many years, and there's this sort of intelligence that is uh, very strong in terms of how they see the world, and they have this very strong point of view, and they're very technically proficient. I haven't met a shallow tattoo artist, and for some reason, I think if you are a shallow tattoo artist, you're probably not going to make it. You probably won't have the clients. And is that because it's almost like you got to be good at the work, the art, and you have to grow, but you're also doing therapy at the same time. You're probably listening to a lot of clients as they're talking to you while you're tattooing.
Um, that is a interesting question because there are a lot of tattooers that don't have ethics. So what happened recently is this thing called Tattoo Gate. So Tattoo Gate is people who are kind of taking advantage of new clientele that are coming into tattooing who kind of don't know the pricing and kind of don't know this and kind of don't know that, right? They don't understand the quality and they don't understand the options that they have out there today. Because today is the greatest options a consumer can have in tattooing ever, right? You have the internet, you have Instagram, you have so many ways to reach out to artists, and a lot of these younger artists who kind of like into the game kind of like treat it like a business instead of like that, hey, that therapy, that culture, that doing things for the customer. They take advantage of them. They want to charge them thousands of dollars just to have a consultation for a drawing and not even started the tattoo yet, and then not refund them their money and then give them attitude and pretend to be rock stars. Again, it goes back to like that discipline, right? So there are a lot of people who kind of just treat it as like a shady business, and if they market themselves well, then yeah, they can be very, very, very successful, right? They can be very successful. It can go into more of a popularity thing than anything, right? Especially the world of Photoshop now, right? They can do a tattoo and it can be really, really like not to par, but they can Photoshop it up and fluff it up and then buyer beware, and throw it up on the internet and be like, hey, this is my stuff. But it's like totally just in real life, you see it and you're like, oh shit, like that's not the same thing, you
Wow.
know?
Damn.
So there's a lot of things that have changed. Technology has changed and opportunities have changed, right? There's a lot of stuff to dig into that, right? Ethics wise.
You talk a lot about ethics, and I had the feeling and suspicion that it comes from how you were trained in a specific tradition. Can you tell me about how you got involved in this specific tradition and your title as Hori? Because there's this whole tradition that you come from, and there's a deep legacy of the work that you do.
Yes. So from what I know, I am the first Vietnamese Hori. Hori means to carve, and it is a title given to mostly tattooers who've gone through a traditional training. You can only get a Hori title if you learn from a Hori master, right? So there's a lineage thing there. If you do not have a Hori master and you start off yourself, then you're considered a Shodai, a person who creates this family. And if you create this family, then you have to get recognized by another family to give it status, right? To give it power, I guess, right? For people to respect that title. Because if you walk around and you have a Hori name, they'll be like, "Who is your teacher?" And then you'd be like, "Oh, my teacher is Horiyen, Jess Yen," right? And then, but if you don't have that, then they're like, "Well, who taught you? Who's your teacher? Why do you self-proclaim yourself as a Hori?" Right? But can you repeat the question again? Sorry,
No, no,
I
that was
have
the
ADHD
no,
sometimes.
no, that was the answer. And then now, when you go about the world of, you started in tattooing and you go about this journey, how did you stumble upon this world of Japanese Hori tradition?
I was already a professional tattoo artist in the Bay Area, and then I came back down. Kind of, I had an opportunity to kind of people wanted to sponsor to open my own shop, and then I think around that time there was kind of like the 2008 financial real estate thing, right? And then a lot of things kind of fell apart. So then I was going to go travel the world with a bud with my old buddy, and then we were just going to tattoo and travel the world. And then it was the days of MySpace, right? So MySpace, I stumbled. They added me in their like my tattoo group, and I took a look and I saw it, and then there was like, oh yeah, Horiyen, Jess Yen, and I saw tebori, and then I was like, huh, I wonder what this is. And then I saw it, and I was like, wow, like I'm really interested. It really like drew me in, and it says that they were taking apprentices. And then I talked to my buddy, and he explained to me what the Hori title was, right? My friend, and then Matt. And then he was like, "Yeah, man, if you get a Hori title, you're like respected everywhere. You can get a job anywhere. You can work, whatever, And I was like, "Oh yeah, all right, let me go check it out. And then I walked in, and it was a different kind of atmosphere, completely than a regular tattoo shop. Because my original training is in Americana, right? It's like a traditional Americana in the Bay Area, and then before that, it was like a street scratcher, like tattooing at tweakers' houses over here. And then I walk into this place where it's like, very heavily Asian influence, very heavily in like respect and tradition, and like, kind of like a dojo.
Wow. And when you go in there, what do they tell you? They're like, hey, this is going to take like a 12-month thing. It's going to take 5 years. What, like, how do they explain this tradition for you?
Oh fuck. Uh, so I walked in there, and then it was more like I came in with my portfolio, right? If I can remember, my memory's not that great, but I walked in there, and then I set up a time for an interview, and then they like looked at my portfolio, and at the time I thought it was like pretty all right. I was like as a professional, brand new tattoo artist, young kid.
How long were you tattooing for at that point?
I did my first tattoo in 2003. I started tattooing at the shops around like 2004 or five, and then I walked into my tattoo around 2006. So this is around 2006. That at the kind of end of the year, mid year. But they broke me. They broke down my work, and then they showed me I wasn't shit. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, I ain't, you know what I mean? They're like, hey, take a look at my other students' work. I took a look at other students' work, and they're like really amazing, right? At that time, it was like Lucy and Milton and Kohei at the time, and yeah, their work was like super clean, like super like very very precise. It wasn't like how you say it was just it was another level, right? And for me to see like that higher caliber, I was like, oh shit, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I had to get humbled. I had to get checked real quick. And then we talked about the apprenticeship, and then the apprenticeship is for life, right? We
Hmm.
learn forever, right? We always want to learn. We always want to keep an apprentice mentality that we are not never there, that we're always open to learning. We're always open to, get new ideas and to grow and to, make our skill better, right? The day that we stop being an apprentice of, of life, or, in this case, tattooing is the day you just stop, man. Go do something else.
I love that. I love it. And when you're looking at these lines in the beginning, right? You're looking at these other students and you're like, wait, my shit's not shit. It triggers me to think about like in our Vietnamese upbringing, we don't have these deep, I don't know, man, I don't want to generalize, but I'm just saying from my point of view, my experience in my life, I haven't been exposed to a lot of like deep cultural discipline the way I'm hearing it coming out of the Japanese training that you're having. Is there a thought that you had during those times where you're like, whoa, the way I was brought up is very different from the way this shop is teaching me to like look at life?
100%, right? Absolutely. So growing up in, like Little Saigon and Westminster and stuff like that, right? It's kind of like a jungle out there, right? It's more like there wasn't a strong rank system or structure, right? It's not
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, there's like the head, and then there's second in command, and then you have your capos, and then you have your grunts or whatever, right? You don't. It's like that structure wasn't really strongly there. It was kind of like everyone for themselves, and it was kind of like uh, the respect value wasn't there. I know there are certain groups, and their structure was pretty good and stuff like that, but it wasn't to the T like this, right? It was kind of like a manual, man. It was like, hey, you do this, here's that problem. You do this, here's that problem. The biggest thing was like there was an answer for fucking everything,
Damn.
right? Like if I'm gonna take out the trash or some shit, there is a fucking process for me to take out the trash. If there's me to like pour a bottle or pour water or something like that, there's a fucking way to pour the water. There's a certain way to make eye contact. There's a certain way to walk,
Wow.
certain way to bow, certain way to open the door, certain way to go to the bathroom, certain way to fold a paper towel, certain way to shake a hand, certain way to light a cigarette. So there's just so much structure in that in itself. You know what I mean? It was totally different, and that time I was young. I was kind of yearning for that structure my whole life.
Yeah.
I was kind of like looking for that because I was kind of like a wild kid. So I needed structure. I needed discipline. I needed someone to put me kind of like in check because like there was really nothing around for me in that way in that world.
What a beautiful answer, man. And I'm always on the quest to instill process driven conversations. I love talking about the idea of process and what you just said about there's a way to go to the bathroom, there's a way to fold a piece of paper, there's a way to fill up ink bottles. All of that is like a beautiful thing that we God damn, I hate saying this all the time. I mean, I'm always making apologies. We just didn't grow. I didn't grow up with that. I didn't have that. I never saw that until I got in the military, right? And you start to reflect on like the quality of where we're headed within design, within tattoo, within fashion, within music. If we don't have these deep cultural processes, like cultures like the Japanese, the Koreans, the Israelis, the Americans, and we don't have these processes in place, it's a sad thing because we can never progress if we don't have a structure.
I agree, and then but also that we do have those structures, right? Like Vietnamese people do have these structures. They do have this rank system. They do have this style. It just wasn't passed on to us as we came here to America, and we kind of lost that way, right?
I don't
Maybe
know.
back in,
Tell me.
I
Tell me.
mean, well, like let's say in, I'm sorry to interrupt,
No, no,
but
no,
like
no. This is a healthy debate, and I want to hear your side. And I welcome anytime I hear like, oh no, no, the Vietnamese have it, but did they have it like the Hori tradition, right? Or did they have it like making swords? I always talk about this stuff with the Japanese. They're just so process driven. So you're
mhm,
coming back
mhm.
with a when it hopefully with a good example, and I want to hear it.
Okay. Okay, it may not be the same, right? And just to go back a little bit, so like the Hori system, yeah, it's taken from like the Japanese structure thing, but My tattoo, Horiyen Ichimon, we are a multicultural group, right? So we're not all Japanese and things like that. We're a mix of all kinds of races, all kinds of genders, all kinds of everything. You know, we're very open in that way. So we take the best parts of all of our cultures, you know what I'm saying? And we put it together and then we formed our family. So I don't want to just put everything like, hey, like this is like the Japanese way, and this is because then we don't do everything like in the Japanese way as well. But back to that question of Vietnamese, right? I've met plenty of Vietnamese cats who are also have that same level of respect and values, and maybe not to the T of like the structure and everything, but you know when you meet another cat and then they're like they have that, you know what I mean? They have the respect, the value, like because at the core of it, that's what's important, right? You understand when to pay respect to your elders. You know when to shut the fuck up. You know when to bow. You know when to serve, right? And you know when to be strong, and you know when to back up your people, and you know when to do the right thing, right? And when to sacrifice yourself for like the greater cause and things like that. I think at the core, there are plenty of us, and there's plenty of Vietnamese people who have that respect value and know the system, right? Because that system is pretty universal um, in say like mafia or say gangs or something like that. Like that's still there, or like a very strict structural in family, right? Like you have to pay respect for the eldest, and then like your parents, and then the eldest siblings, and then like so that rank system is there. We talk about it, but how enforced was it upon us, right? Because in America, it was the land of the free. It was what I mean, it was like opportunists. Everybody's equal, and everybody out there get your shit, right? Don't matter how big you are, you still get got, right? But I think if you're like classically trained, like within like a family system, and that was taught to you, then that's there. I just don't think it was our norm, right? It wasn't our community norm.
Yeah, and that's really what I'm talking about. What you're talking about is more like etiquette, tradition, family piety, filial piety. You're talking about how we respect each other and love each other and sort of like the infrastructure of the family and how that operates, right? And I agree with you. In that way, culturally, we do have a very cool hierarchical system that sometimes a little bit toxic from the patriarchy and most of the time, but I
Yeah,
am
yeah.
talking about something different. I'm talking about traditions of creating products.
Okay, craft stars. Sorry, I got
No, no,
sidetracked.
no, no, no,
Uh,
because I wasn't clear enough in my question to you. And I'm glad that you brought that up because that is something that I respect very much is this, the way we are in our families and our hierarchical structures. But I'm talking now specifically, I want to drill down because you create a product, which is tattoos, you create art, and
mhm,
there's a process. And I always want to go back to that in all the people that I talk to in the Vietnamese world, whether you're making movies, you're
mhm.
writing a book, or you're doing tattoos, right? Doesn't matter to me. The deep tradition, and why does a Vietnamese kid have to go to get a Japanese thing? Because the tradition in the Japanese side is so rich. And then where and when is the Vietnamese traditional tattoo going to come up on the map and figure out a way to go discipline, ethics, all the things that you talk about that you've gotten in your life? And I'm curious about that process for the Vietnamese culture.
Got it, got it. So I think the thing is that when you go through Hori training, it changes you, right? It changes you mentally, spiritually. Like, you just become a different person, right? Who I am today is far different than who I was before I became a Hori, right? So what it is that it had nothing to do with tattooing, ironically, right? It was having the mentality before the skill, right? Giving a shit, right? Caring, right? Having respect for what you're doing, right? Having respect for your clientele, right? Like tattooing is not it's not my hobby, right? It's not my job, right? It is my life, right? So we switch that mentality to This is not just something that I practice. This is something that I live. This is something that who I am, right? So tattoos are for life. So how can I not treat it as lifetime things, right? One dot on your skin is forever. So how can we not treat it with the utmost highest respect, right? So in that mentality, we treat everything in that way, you know, everything very careful, everything double checked, everything, cross reference. And we work together as well, and to have that discipline, right? It really comes down to your teacher, right? You have a loose teacher, then you're going to have a loose training, right? You have a very disciplined teacher, right? There's a saying, they're saying masters are always hard to please, right? And there's a reason for that. So when everything is very difficult, everything else becomes very easy. It's like people who are kind of like proud of getting like good grades or something like that, right? They're like, "Hey, I got good grades. I got good." You're supposed to get good grades, right? It's a different mentality. It's like you go to school, you're supposed to do well, right? Like, oh, I go to work and I did a good job. You're supposed to do a good job. What if I went to work today and I just fucked up your tattoo and I just fuck off all day? Like I'm supposed to do a good job. That's what you came here for. You gave me your monies and all this and stuff, or you trust me with your skin. Let's just cut money, all of that. You come with me to do this thing for you, right? I'm supposed to do my best for you. That's the bottom line. That's not the top line. That's the bottom line. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's the thing when I'm talking about. You have got it. You've got that. You've adopted that. You have
Yeah.
picked it up in the tradition that you have practiced in. But what I'm saying is that we need more of that in the Vietnamese culture. When we're making ceramics, when we're doing music, when we're doing whatever,
Mm-hmm.
we got to get to that level where the standard is you got to fucking kill it. You got to kick ass and you got to give it. And it's just not. I dig for this all the time in our older
Yeah.
generations. Why is it not there? Why
Give
don't
it time. We
Yeah,
have to give it
sure.
time. We have to give it time. So let's say if I start teaching and I pass down this knowledge that I have onto somebody else, right? Regardless of race or anything like that. If I have Vietnamese students, or I can, influence those people, be like, yeah, well, I want to be like that, right? And you're looking at like restaurants right now, or like, or any other industry right now, like Vietnamese people are bringing the bar up from what it used to be,
The
right?
young folks are definitely
Yeah.
they're scaling it like
So,
concepts, the restaurant
mhm.
group in Orange County, definitely doing the discipline, definitely doing the work.
Yeah, I think the reason why is because Vietnam and Vietnamese people have always been in a constant battle. We've always been preoccupied you know, with just wars,
Yeah.
right? There's just been wars from the beginning of time, from the beginning of history, just until now, really. Only now is that Vietnam has and Vietnamese people have really like found some peace, right? Or are really getting like that time to give a shit about a pot, right? Or give a shit about, some mundane thing, right? Before that, it was survival, right? Like, yo, I gotta put food on the table.
Yeah.
I gotta do this. I gotta do that. I gotta survive. Like, the fuck do I care about, arts and crafts and music and and standards and stuff like that? I just gotta do whatever I gotta do, right? And then I got like 10 kids and I got this and I got that. I don't know how our parents' generation did that. Like, it's hardcore, you
Yeah, you're
know?
right. You're 100% right. They had to worry about getting the next generation in the US or abroad or wherever, even in Vietnam, well enough so they can make money so they don't have to like die of
Hmm.
hunger. They always have to worry about that. So this idea of like figuring out process is almost wiped out. If maybe we did have it hundreds of years ago, but it's not there anymore. It's completely,
Yeah, it's completely gone now. But I think it's the sacrifice of the older generation that they made for us, right? Working at the bullshit things that they were not passionate about. They didn't give, they just did it because it was ends meet and, it got their kids to a better place, to have a better opportunity so they can pursue whatever and then fixate and then create that quality. So I think maybe it's just the baseline of us setting things up for generational success.
Yeah, and I always go back to this idea of like ownable exports coming out of Vietnam, whether it's coming out of Vietnamese culture in America or Vietnamese culture in Vietnam or Germany, it doesn't matter. If we could really focus on the quality of things and the process of the quality, then there is a shot of sending out ownable exports because we have a lot of young people in Vietnam. We have a lot of young people around the
Hmm.
world.
Hmm.
And we just have to really correct this way of pushing our ownable exports into the world. And we need to really focus and drive this idea of process the way the Hori tradition is doing for you.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think they're doing that, right? And I think we're in that trajectory,
Yeah.
right? We're definitely in that trajectory. Vietnam is filled with a younger generation, right? There's more young people than old people. So they have the bright ideas. They're willing to try all these new things, right? They're willing to spend that money to pimp out their coffee shop, right? And make it more modern and have that service. And they've traveled to, Japan and Korea and Singapore and the US and around the world. And they've gotten that worldly experience, and they brought that stuff back, right? And all, and yeah, I think it's going in that way. And I totally feel you too, because like I remember just like, oh, Vietnamese people just like franchise this thing, they're gonna fuck it up. Watch, and it happens all the time, right? Because it's just they don't crack the whip, right? They're just like, oh, you're supposed to do this shit, you're supposed to do that, right? Because maybe they feel that their people is gonna be mad at them or something like that, or whatever. But it's business, right? It's business, or it's something that you went in for money and you don't really give a shit about, right?
Exactly.
So
That's what I'm
yeah.
talking about. It's like the quick buck mentality, right? Just going to
Hmm.
make quick money. Just going to make quick money and let's not worry about how this turns out. You know why? Because I come from that upbringing. I come from
Hmm.
I was around that a lot in my life. And you cut corners and you're just like, fuck, let's just make the money. Let's just make
Yeah, làm đại đi, right?
làm
Like
đại
làm đại
đi,
đi,
cái gì cũng được.
làm đại đi,
Yeah,
fuck it, right?
làm
Yeah,
đại đi. You know,
yeah,
I um I know that you love history because I think we were hanging out in this plaza with Brian Huang, another artist, and right we were walking around the back
yeah, yeah,
parking lot, and you were going into the historical details of these murals that were left to just kind of rot back there. But I really
yeah.
respect the things that you had to say about the art that was existing on the thing. And I when I was listening to you, I'm like, oh, this is interesting because you know all these details about actually what I have on the back of these panels here is my brother his company. It's all the stuff that you
Oh,
were talking about at
oh, I see it.
yeah when we're walking.
Wow, it's
Tanyao
beautiful.
and all of these wonderful
Yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah.
Where did you learn all that stuff?
Um, well, as I was training in my tattoo, Horiyen Ichimon, right? Everyone kind of was like had their thing, right? They were like focusing on like, oh yeah, I'm gonna focus on Japanese work, right? And then so, oh, I'm gonna focus on Chinese work, right? Or I'm gonna do uh, calligraphy, brush style, stuff like that, right? And then I sat there, I was like, well, what's mine, right? And we sit there and we're like, well, what is Vietnamese culture? What is a Vietnamese tattoo? What is, Vietnamese history, right? And as a young kid, I really didn't know other than besides, war and stuff like that. And every time, early Google, when you Google anything like Vietnamese, it just popped up as war. And then that's when I learned the phrase Vietnam is not a war. It is a country. It is a people. That shit doesn't happen to like Japan. You don't look up like Japan and it's just like, oh yeah, war. No, it's castles and fucking geishas and cherry blossoms and fun shit and food and ramen. Like, what the fuck, right? Like, how come when I Google Vietnam, it's just like, oh yeah, it's just fucking Americans and fucking China, and like it's just like fuck. So there wasn't a lot of information out there. I met a guy by the name of Jack Bosher. He's a big inspiration as well, and then he's a friend of my master, Jess Yen. And then he was guest spotting with us, and then he had a bountiful information about Japanese culture, Japanese stories,
He's a white
right?
guy.
And then he's a white guy. Yeah, he's a white guy from Kalamazoo, right? And then, but he wears Japanese clothing. He folds it the right way. He carries a katana, so he knows how to sit down on the floor. He's super fanatic like that, right? And then I was like, holy shit, right? And then I was like, do you read and write Japanese? And he's like, no, not a lick. I was like, what the fuck, man? And then that really inspired me. I was like, bro, because my Vietnamese isn't that great. It is my first language, but my reading and writing it just kind of just fell off, and even speaking kind of fell off now, right? Because I moved to the Bay and back, and I just don't use it as much as I used to anymore. But yeah, that really inspired me. Be like, you know what? If this guy can do it, fucking, I can do it, right? And then I'm tired of seeing I was tired of seeing Vietnamese cats, and they want to get a tattoo, but they just get everything else, right? They get Japanese tattoos, they get Chinese tattoos, they get Mexican tattoos, they get like, I'm not trying to be like, all kinds of race, but they get everything but Vietnamese tattoos because the general public doesn't know what that is. We don't know what that is, right?
Not,
And
not, not only do we not
and
know what
I
that
didn't
is,
know what that was.
yeah, not only do we not know what that is, but I'm sure the artists who are tattooing, there's not a lot of you guys that are doing that particular thing.
No, absolutely not. But I started that research, damn near 20 years ago, and there's no demand for it, right? So I had to give it up. So I tried and I learned, I read the books and stuff like that, and but then I try to push it into like the Vietnamese general
Yeah.
public, and they don't know what it was and they don't understand it. It looks kind of weird to them, right? They're like, I don't get it, right? It looks like, because I specifically do like pre-China occupation, like some culture, stuff like that, right? So they're like, I don't get it, I don't understand. And then, but the only thing that really stuck was Vietnamese calligraphy, Vietnamese brush style, right? As you saw at the signing that day. So that was the only thing that kind of stuck that I kind of kept doing that really sold to the market on a global scale. Everywhere around the world, people love Vietnamese brush style, right? Their name in Spanish, in French, in German, or whatever, right? In English, right? Like Samantha, can you do my wife's name Samantha, but Vietnamese brush style? So that kind of stuck because that was easy to understand, right? So that's why I think it's good. We have to push the narrative. We have to push the story. Once you understand the story, and then you're like, oh wow, that's kind of cool. And then you can push the tattoo. This is specifically for tattooing, but I think that's for anything else. Jack Mosher also said that too. It's like first you have to educate. You have to educate your clients, and then they can appreciate and then like it, you know? Because other than that, everyone's just getting dragons, kois, hanyas, whatever, right? Until you really know the story, until it really hits like general public. And they're like, oh yeah, there's other things, right? So yeah, you don't have to get tattoos of tofa or whatever.
At the end of the day, it's all about the story. At
Yeah.
the end of the day, in order to sell anything, in order to be proud of anything, it's all about the fucking story. And
Hmm.
in your work, having to persuade Vietnamese men and women to get fucking symbols and art pieces of their own culture is something of a fucking uphill battle because they just want to get the Japanese stuff because that looks cool.
Yeah, I mean, at that time, right? At that time, now today, right? The internet has caught up, right? So the internet has caught up, and then there's far more access to that information now. Now that there's far more access to that information, people now understand, and now people are kind of looking for people like me, right? So now I'm put into this position where I'm kind of blessed, right? Where people are kind of coming to me just for that. They're like, "Hey, man, I know you're the Vietnamese tat guy, right? Like you're the one with the history, you're the guy with the knowledge, and that's what you're paying for. You're not paying for my skill, you're paying for what I know, right? My education, right? Like, yeah, I can find out, and create the same thing with the Japanese flow, with the skill of realism or whatever, that my masters have taught me. And then I can bring that into Vietnamese stories and Vietnamese art, and or even like sneak some Vietnamese stuff in with the Japanese stuff, or sneak it in with the other stuff and get in, so I can pay an homage to what I'm trying to do.
What would it take to have a Vietnamese master tradition, like the holy tradition, but for the Vietnamese culture?
It's already happening, right? So my master, Horiyen Jess Yen, right? We have an overseas student in Vietnam. His name is Dennis. He is the owner of Saigon Inc. And then, he is kind of like a sub factor of our group. And, it all follows in that line of tradition as well. So, they have to check in with us. And then you also have another artist in Vietnam that is under a trial process right now to join our family. His name is Lam Viet in the north. So hopefully that these traditions will come to them, but they already have that heart already. You know, their heart is already there in that in alignment in that same values. You know what I mean? Because you can't just have that for everybody because it's not for
Yeah.
everybody, right? It's like not everyone's willing to like dedicate their themselves and their lives to this thing, right? Tattooing now, I feel like it's kind of trendy, it's kind of fad, it's kind of cool or whatever, right? But we were all in this when it wasn't cool, right? Where you were looked at as like a scumbag or like lower than low end of society, you know? So it's a different world now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that tradition is gonna be spread out there and coming down and so on and so forth. And yeah.
And I still am a little bit sitting on pins and needles right now to think of it as Japanese culture in Vietnam. It's just I'm trying to make peace with it because I am so pro Vietnamese and pro culture Vietnamese getting elevated that I'm having,
Hmm.
and talk me through this, walk me through this. Like, I guess going back to the original question that I asked is there a way to channel it into becoming a Vietnamese tradition, Vietnamese way of doing things instead of the branded? Because you bring the Hori into Vietnam, then it becomes the Japanese Vietnamese tradition, right? Is there anybody doing a really process driven thing like the Horis, but from a Vietnamese cultural perspective?
I believe there are some groups in Vietnam that are building their own family style system, but that's in their own way. Like I said, if you don't learn it from a Hori, then you can't have the Hori title, right? Or you shouldn't, right? But they are basically essentially creating their own family style system and their own shodai, right? But it's just gonna be like, oh, like Andy's family or something like that, right? So they're just doing it on their own because they see it and they're mimicking it, right? And again, it's gonna come down to ethics, right? Do you train 200 students like all at once, right? Are you like that of a
Yeah.
master, right? Or are you doing it because you want the power, or is it that because you want the money, or is it that because you're too lazy to clean up after yourself, or whatever it is? Because that I believe that is a thing that tattooing has always really hated, like the tattoo community has always hated the older heads, right? And as the newer generation comes in, they don't give a flying fuck, right? Like I'm just gonna do a web seminar, or I'm gonna teach as many people as possible without teaching them the core values of tattooing or the core values of the industry, right? Just the simple matter of respect is already like not there, right? They're just teaching it just like, oh, just because it's fucking Fantastic Sam's now, I'm just gonna teach people how to cut hair. It's gonna so I fear that tattooing is gonna just fall into that realm of, there's gonna be so many that it's gonna lose its kind of its exclusivity and its beauty, right? Yeah, I mean like everyone join in, but the right people to join in, the right people who give a shit, right? And not, shallow tattooers like you said, or people who just kind of want to do it for the weekend.
Yeah, but it's kind of like, making alcohol, right? Like anybody can make alcohol. Anybody can
Yeah,
make
it's true. It's
beer.
true.
Anybody. And it's not that hard. It's really not hard to make beer.
Hmm.
Anybody can make wine. Anybody can press and distill whiskey. But
Hmm.
why are certain whiskeys consistent and they're clean and they make you feel a certain way when they hit your palate? And it's the same thing. I think people who enjoy those kinds of things, who have the palate to understand a good whiskey, or people who put deliberate images of what they really want and they take years to think about, they go to a guy like you because there's an alignment there of sort of like, I want to plan, I want to think, I want to like go deep, and I got to find the guy who can actually execute that.
I totally agree, right? Like tattooing is not a hard thing to process or do, right? You just pick up a thing, and then of course technology has changed a lot of that because we use different equipment then than we do now, which dictates the difference of what level of art you can do now, right? Because of technology, because of the tools that we have today. But the thing is that with any other product, it's not permanent, it's not forever, and it's
Mm.
not like you don't make someone else bleed and go through pain and things like that. For permanence is something that the generations and generations and all their family sees and gets judged upon, and it's on your skin forever, right? So it's that, just that level of respect where, like what I was saying before, is like we don't play around, right? One dot, even one single dot, should require all of your effort, all of your love, all of your respect towards that skin, right? Towards that person, right? It's just like if I were to tattoo you, I would give you my utmost best, right? I'm gonna die trying to do the best for you because that's my responsibility. That is my, what I mean?
Yeah.
Not my job, but that's my responsibility. You know what I mean? That's my respect.
Now, do you look back on all the work you did before you got really good and you go, damn, do you feel bad for all the people who got your tattoo in the early years?
I still feel I fucked up today. You know what I mean? I really don't think I'm good. You know what I mean?
Wow.
I never think I'm good. I maybe feel happy for like 5, 10 minutes. You know what I'm saying? So I love all my clients, and I love, and all the work that I've done is the best I can do. Right? I can honestly die with no regret because it is my absolute best that I could give to you. Right? Whether I think it's good or not, that's my own problem. Right? That's my own, mental problem. Right? Like never happy, never
I
fucking.
love
It's
that
never
answer.
good enough. Right?
Yeah, I love that answer, man.
So yeah, it's never perfect. It's never, like, again, we're artists are delusional, right? Like I'm just being honest. Like it's just a delusion, right? It's never perfect. It's never, there's always something I can look back and be like, fuck, I wish I could just change that thing, right? That 1% thing, and that's an obsession, right? And yeah, and I'm sorry for all the cats before my shit, and if you feel like I fucked up your tattoo, my bad, but that's the best I can do, you know, at that time.
There is a beautiful book that
Oh,
I've been given by you. It's beautiful. This is such a beautiful book. Can you tell me about how the book was put together? Because physically, it is not like a regular book. There's folding papers and pages, and it is a beautiful book about art. It's not just tattooing, right? And can you tell me about the journey of the book and why the book is in existence?
well, we've talked about making a book for a very, very long time, but all of us are artists, right?
Who's we?
None of us, I mean, our collective, right? Horiyen Ichimon, my tattoo, Jess Yen family, right? So the Jess Yen family, uh, current members are our master and leader, Jess Yen. Then it goes down to Lucy Hu, and then it goes to Hori Shin, and then myself, Horitran, and then Man Yao, and then it goes to Dewey Nguyen, and then Sunny Ma. So those are the core members of my tattoo family. Um, the book came about is we were always thinking about doing a family book, but it's mostly my master. He was going to do a book, and he was approach a book. But my master's very inclusive, right? He's like, I know you guys want me, but I want to include my family, right? He's always very inclusive of us. He's like, I mean, you gotta fuck with my family, right? Yeah, I do everything. He does everything for the family. You know what I mean? It's a very selfless act of him. So he did a gallery with Horiyoshi the Third in Japan, right? An art gallery where we did these scroll paintings, as you saw in the at the Asian Garden Mall, Hotel. So it's that same style. So he did a gallery, so and then the year after he invited us, the students, and then so we started doing scroll paintings, and then we got the honor of joining Horiyoshi family in Japan to do art galleries in Japan every year. And then all those pictures were kind of like a collective of all that art and all of sub art, and then put together by Zushu, which is a partner of Osis. He's the artisan who makes all like the jewelries and everything that you saw that section in the book. And then he's a master bookmaker, and then he helped consult with my master, and then they just made a bunch of these crazy decisions. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it was epic seeing you sign these books because it was like a shit ton of people surrounding your table as you're signing these beautiful books. And yeah, at that point I was like, oh, this guy's the real deal. I started to look at the book, look through the book, and I was like, well, this is something. This is a for me. It's a story here because it's not just a Vietnamese tattoo artist. There's some lineage here. There's an understanding of ethics and discipline, all the things that you mentioned before. And I am, so happy to have gotten your story today and heard what you do. And I really appreciate that.
oh, thank you for having me. Yeah, I wish I showed up a bit earlier that day, and I got everything prepared. Everything was kind of just like the perfect storm, and everything was last minute. Those books just got in like that day, and then I just happened to bring them that day too.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And once again, Andy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I hope to see more of you at these events.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you for listening to The Vietnamese with Kenneth Nguyen. Special thanks to Brittany Tran, to Jane Nguyen, Catherine Nguyen, Tina Pham, Sydney Jamie, and Christo Trin. Please find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at The Vietnamese Podcast.